I'd like to start off by introducing the amazing Nour Haydar. She will be our moderator for this evening, and she's someone whose voice, integrity and commitment to truth-telling have made a profound impact on journalism in Australia. Nour Haydar is a senior producer and co-host of Full Story, Guardian Australia's flagship daily news podcast. Before joining The Guardian, she worked as a federal political reporter with ABC News in the Canberra Press Gallery, covering major national events. She has also served as the ABC's acting Europe correspondent in London and as a presenter on ABC News Breakfast. In 2024, Nour delivered the prestigious A.M. Smith Journalism Lecture, an annual address delivered by a leading authority on journalism. Her lecture, A Reflection on Palestine, Australian Media and Who Gets to Shape the Story, examined the failures of Western newsrooms to support culturally diverse journalists and the consequences for public understanding. The next person I want to introduce is the first panel member, Khaled Shakhshir. Khaled Shakhshir is a Palestinian-Australian humanitarian aid worker, engineer and entrepreneur. He is the executive producer of the documentary we've just watched and contributed extensive on-the-ground footage to its creation. Khaled travelled to Gaza in July 2024, where he provided humanitarian support and undertook highly specialised technical repairs on critical medical machinery, including restoring a C-arm image intensifier, a device vital for live X-ray imaging during bone surgeries, heart interventions, and vascular procedures. He has been featured across international media, including multiple appearances on Al Jazeera. In one interview that personally moved me a lot, he said, "Leaving was definitely the hardest thing. How am I going to explain to the children that we're just going to leave them behind?" We are incredibly fortunate to have the compassionate insight of the engineer and the executive producer behind today's documentary. Please welcome Khaled Shakhshir as well. And from the crucial perspective of engineering and humanitarian support, we now turn to someone whose surgical work, both here and in Gaza, has saved countless lives. Dr. Bushra Othman is an Australian-Palestinian general and colorectal surgeon and another key contributor to the footage featured in the documentary we saw today. She was the first female Australian member of PANSMA to volunteer in Gaza, completing 3 medical missions in Gaza, with the most recent one being July 2025. PANSMA has described her as, quote, Gaza's brightest light in its darkest war, a tribute to the life-saving surgical work she carried out under bombardment and siege. Here in Australia, Dr. Othman is a tireless advocate for Palestine. She's spoken pretty much everywhere, so Parliament, national and international media, engaged in community events, podcasts, social platforms, protests. If there's a place to speak truth for Palestine, Dr. Bushra Othman is there. It's my absolute pleasure to also introduce her to the panel. And now we'll welcome the 2 doctors whose courage, compassion and commitment you've just witnessed throughout the documentary. Dr. Siraj is a general practitioner based in Parramatta. Originally from India, he completed his medical degree at Bangalore University before moving to Australia. Now, I had the privilege of working under him during a medical mission in Uganda earlier this year, and I saw firsthand how tirelessly he serves, driven by a belief that absolutely every patient deserves to be seen, heard, and helped. And there was one day I remember during the first day of our mission, it was quite exhausting, and he was debriefing with me, and he kind of sensed that I had a bit of a tinge of helplessness because of the situation I was seeing. And I remember he told me, "Fahad, listen to me. If we can make even one child smile, the entire mission will have been worth it." There was an evening long after we had officially, quote-unquote, finished for the day, where around 50 patients remained waiting outside the medical clinic. Dr. Siraj refused to leave until every single one of them had been treated, and every single one of them had received oral replacement supplements and something to go home with to ensure that they had something to rehydrate themselves and give them some nutrition. And that's when I realized that Dr. Siraj truly achieves his satisfaction through coming to the help of others. Every smile and every connection that he makes serves as fuel to keep him going, and that is what makes him, in my opinion, an unstoppable force in medicine. Now, Dr. Sanjay, it's sort of like a buy one, get one free deal with him. Dr. Sanjay, meanwhile, brings a complementary and equally powerful commitment. He is a senior, well-respected general and colorectal surgeon working in Western Sydney, highly respected for both his surgical expertise and his dedication to mentoring junior surgeons. On missions, he works with the same tirelessness, always ready to see more patients and always asking what more can be done. But the thing that I especially saw in Uganda, and we saw even in the documentary today, is that he focuses on capacity building, ensuring that the local teams and junior doctors are left with greater skills, better equipment and stronger systems than before. Where Dr. Siraj finds fulfillment in relationships and primary care, Dr. Sanjay finds purpose in repairing what can be repaired and transforming lives through surgery. Together, they represent two essential and complementary forms of medical compassion. One grounded in excellent primary care and the other in technical surgical mastery, both driven by the same unwavering commitment to humanity. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sira and Dr. Sanjay Adusumilli.
Thank you, Fahad, for that generous introduction, and it is truly an honour to be sharing the stage this evening with such a compassionate and selfless group of individuals. So thank you for the privilege. I might begin the two men whose voice carries this documentary, Dr. Sanjay and Dr. Siraj. As a storyteller, I'm fascinated to hear a bit from you about how this documentary came to life. You have gone on numerous medical missions in the past. Why did you feel it was important to document this one? Can you talk to me a bit about why that felt like an important thing to do?
We actually weren't planning on having a documentary made, so by chance we'd come across Jason and Erica, who, after hearing about what we were doing, they were very passionate, and it's only because of the efforts that they've put into making this that this actually became possible. So after this is made and after we've actually seen the footage and they've put everything together, you realise how important the story is to be able to tell everyone about exactly what we saw. If we can impart some change and have people see what's happening overseas, then it may make some difference into stopping this conflict that is unnecessary in the first place. So it wasn't planned, but it happened.
At the beginning of this documentary, the preparation that goes into one of these missions, the preparation of gathering the medical equipment you need, preparing your wheels, the added layer of documenting, and as someone described it earlier this evening, of bearing witness and providing testimony. I wonder if you could talk to me about why that felt like an important thing for you to do.
We've been on many medical missions before this, and this is probably the most conflictual place that we've been to. So getting the medical equipment was a big issue, and also knowing what we could take in was a big issue. We were fortunate that at the time there were some restrictions, but they weren't as bad as they got after we left. There was a lot more, obviously you saw the aid truck sitting outside with a lot of medical equipment that couldn't get through. That became even stricter after we had gotten there. So we were fortunate that we had quite a few supplies that we could get. And it was also, I have to acknowledge all the people that gave the medical supplies. There was people from various hospitals that came along and said, we've got this equipment that we would like to give you. Along with that, as you mentioned, we had to get our paperwork in order, so it was a big process in terms of getting, we had to get authority from the Israelis, from the United Nations, from the Palestinian Authority as well, to get acceptance to go into Gaza. We had to get our own paperwork in order, so we had to get our wills done, just in case something did happen. So it was a mission that took many months to plan.
Bushra, I might bring you into the conversation now. Anyone who's been watching over the last 2 years would know that hundreds of healthcare workers have been killed, many more have been detained or disappeared. I've heard you speak before about your motivations for going into Gaza, not once but 3 times. I wonder if you could share with us what compelled you to do that despite the very real risks that you and your colleagues working in hospitals and working in healthcare face there.
I think the reasons for going the second and third time definitely felt different than the first. So for anyone who works in healthcare, especially for people who work in hospitals, you form a very, very strong bond with your teams and you spend a lot of time, so they become like your second family. Some people might even say the people you see most more than your own family. For me, for my first mission, I couldn't fathom witnessing all of the videos and the footage that we were seeing of these healthcare workers that were just doing everything that they could, and yet that they couldn't cope with all of that workload, and feeling like me as a Palestinian, as a person who had been trained in Australia with some level of skill in trauma and general surgery, and as a Muslim who has been taught to be in service of others, that I would just sit here in this privileged life of safety and not want to go there. The very last footage on that documentary is actually from the very first few hours of when I touched down in Gaza. So I remember when we were at the safe house, we managed to get to the beach, and the striking contrast at that point was really all of these mothers with young babies coming up to me and saying, have you brought in baby formula? Like, have you brought in nappies? Is this international? And Israel had restricted everything that we could bring in. And yet you see the joy in those children's smiles when they're sort of running around on the beach, and all you could do is sort of try and partake in that. So all of those moments really day in, day out made you feel like you developed these really strong connections with people. I mean, you stay in the hospital 24/7. A lot of the surgical colleagues that Dr. Sanjay would know, I worked with on all of my 3 medical missions now, and so returning for the second and third felt like an obligation to go and help friends and colleagues and my own family. And you mean, the texts and the updates that they send you are beyond heartbreaking. I mean, even till now, in this post-quasi-ceasefire glow, they're still just trying to survive on a daily basis. People would have seen the rain coming down in the last couple of days. The ground floor of a hospital has been flooded and they've evacuated the children with their oxygen tanks. People are still trying to find something in terms of food and water and tents to survive. And so by no means should we kid ourselves that they're in a much better state than what they've been in before. And the one thing I get asked all the time is, will I ever go back? I'm surprised people don't know the answer to that. But the answer is only when, not if.
Khaled, I might direct this next question to you because you offer a slightly different perspective. I believe you were on one of the medical missions that Dr. Bushra was on back in July of 2024, but you're an engineer. Can you talk to us about the work that you went to Gaza to do and what were you confronted with when you arrived?
Usually the attention and the focus is directly towards medical supplies, doctors, hospitals, and I'd like to give some recognition to as well some of the heroes in the background that work in the engineering department of these hospitals, because at the end of the day, we all know hospitals cannot operate without critical infrastructure, such as electricity, water, and water treatment plants for clean drinking water, especially for the ill and injured. Then comes the second part of oxygen machines, dialysis machines, and then comes what we call the direct impact, which is when we think of hospitals, when we think of war and injuries, we think of CT scans, X-rays. But even if we fix a CT scan machine or an X-ray, if there is no electricity, it's not going to run. And one of the things that all doctors have experienced there, and we've seen from an engineering perspective, is that halfway through a surgery, the electricity will be cut off, and then the surgeon have to continue on a torch or a mobile phone, some headlights. And so that's a big part of why I was there, and just trying to help and get some attention and light on that side of the conversation. The thing is, it's hard and challenging from every different way. For example, when we talk about electricity, even the we don't have electrical generators that are working. Even if we fix an electrical generator and then it can work, we don't have fuel to get that electric generator working. And then even when we get the fuel, we don't have enough electrical generators working because with the blockhead there is no lubricants going in, there's no oils going in, no service parts. And so one of the main aims is to keep the critical infrastructure from water and then water treatment plants for clean water, obviously, and then electricity. And then the second part comes dialysis machines, oxygen tanks, and then after that comes what everyone thinks about are the actual machines such as X-ray and C-arm, the one that we were able to fix, and CT scans and so on. And yeah, it's very challenging. I'll add as well that the talent they have there and the experience, the amount of creativity that teams there have, and I think everyone agrees from all different perspectives, but surgeons can talk more about the doctors. But same for engineers, because of the situation they're in, they're creative in a point, they find solutions that outside of Gaza or in different parts of the world we cannot even think of. They kind of create something out of nothing. And so I've witnessed myself a lot of equipment that for us in Australia or anywhere in the world, it'll be just scrap. This goes to the scrap yard, this is not fixable. But for them there, because there's no other choices, they fix things manually with their hand, they're creative, they find solutions, and what they lack the supplies.
I'm sorry to steal the mic for 2 seconds. Khaled's way too humble to mention a couple of things, so I just wanted to draw people's attention to something. When I entered in June, Khaled came a week after me, and one of the major operations that needs to be done is people who've got broken bones in Gaza. Like, they are probably 60 to 70% of the surgeries that need to happen. And the orthopedic surgeons, if they don't have that X-ray machine and theatre in order to be able to put the metal where and see where it goes, they can't operate appropriately. So I entered on the 13th of June, and for the Muslims here, you recognise on the 16th of June was Eid al-Adha. So it's like the Christmas celebration for Muslims. There wasn't any celebrating because there was no meat, there was no chicken, everyone was trying to survive a genocide. And the X-ray machine had been broken for either 7 or 10 days. When Khaled came in, he worked with the local engineering team to fix that machine. And when I tell you they celebrated in those operating theatres for what they could do for their patients, it was bigger than any of the celebrations that they'd had for Eid. The second thing that I'll just pay tribute to is, I know people think that maybe us three up here deserve all this recognition for all of the work that we've been doing, which I don't actually agree with. A lot of the hard work is done by people that you don't know about. And Khaled is one of those workhorses. He has sacrificed time and sleep and his family life, and Alice, his wife, has given a lot for Khaled to be able to help the people of Gaza. A lot of the projects that you see on the ground are basically only happening because of Khaled and his connections. So I'd ask everyone to thank him for everything that he's done.
And I will come back to you, Khaled, because I'm keen to hear a bit more about how you responded in a really practical way on the ground, despite just, I guess, destruction, a scale of destruction that we can't really wrap our heads around. Dr. Siraj, in the documentary, one line that stays with me, and I think that was conveyed very powerfully, was when you described the sensory overload when you arrived in Gaza. I wonder if you can talk to me about that and how you as a doctor operate and think when you are immersed in an environment where there are threats, where there are tragedies unfolding around you.
Gaza is such a welcoming place. People are welcoming. I was a real piece of myself. But then, 1 or 2 days into it, you see there's so much suffering, there's so much, you're not sleeping properly, there are drones, and you see so much suffering and so much heartache all around. Dads coming, working in a nutrition center, pleading, is there milk here, is there baby formula here, my kids haven't eaten. They had all taken refuge, most of them had taken refuge. I was working in Tal Sultan, So there was a school nearby, and they'd taken refuge there in a mosque and things, so they would come from there. When I say sincerely, oh Lord, you see so much crying, so much sorrow, so much death. You have to constantly remind yourself, you're there to help people, you can't solve their problems. You're there to support them, be there for them, and do the best you can. It's hard, but end of the day, it's you're there for a reason, and you try your best to help out the best you can.
Dr. Sanjay, when we spoke some 18 months ago, you had recently arrived from this mission, and you spoke to me about why you felt compelled to do media interviews to describe what you saw in Gaza, and you spoke about needing to educate, needing to inform people, because as you say in the documentary, not even 1 or 2% of the reality on the ground is being conveyed to people abroad. I wonder if I could get you to reflect on how the last 12 months or so have been as you've tried to have those conversations, as you've tried to discuss with people what you have seen in Gaza. Have you sensed a shift in people's responses, in their attitudes? How has that been for you personally?
When we first arrived back from Gaza, it was very frustrating. I felt like we were talking to everyone. We were saying genocide. This is a genocide happening. You don't get destruction of buildings like this in a city where everything is destroyed and claim that it's been targeted. We saw it for our own eyes, and it was like it was cruciating at the top of our lungs saying, find me a doctor who has been to Gaza and who says it's not a genocide. But nothing felt like it was moving. We'd been to the protests. I'd been to Parliament House to talk about it, and you get your small number of people who want to listen to you, who are compassionate and caring, and who want to make a difference. But there's a whole lot of people who, to be honest, I think they know about it, but they actually choose to be ignorant, and that was incredibly frustrating. And I think it's only after the concerted efforts of a lot of people, the tens of thousands of people who protest regularly, the march across the bridge, people like Bushra who speak all the time, is that things started to shift. And I've only seen that happen probably in the past 6 to 8 months. But prior to this, it was very frustrating, and I felt like we were having no impact whatsoever.
Bushra, could I ask for your reflections on that as well?
I think in some ways part of the turning point was around when Israel had deliberately blocked food and aid in terms of going in. So when they violated the ceasefire on the 18th of March and bombed Al-Ahli, or the Baptist hospital, and we saw international doctors even trying to understand where to go and what to do, I felt the world sort of slowly start to ask that question of, why would the state of Israel not allow food and aid to go in to Gaza? Like, what is it about this place now that's allowing that to happen? And I think parts of the conversations then really started to shift. I think some of the things that have been really difficult is the cognitive dissonance, where you feel you work in healthcare, which I believe is an honour and a privilege for us to be able to be in service of others, but then you exist as part of this community that you can tell them, I held kids' brains in my hands, that I'm seeing my colleagues being targeted and bringing in their family members. I'm seeing kids put the washing out on the line, such as Rama, who was 13 years old and she's being shot by a quadcopter. And I can go on and on and on about all of the endless war crimes that have been committed. And you'll give a presentation to a surgical community or a medical community, and they'll say, thank you so much, like that was a really good presentation. And you think, I've literally just described horrors and ethnic cleansing and erasure about my own people and now my family and friends. And the most that I can hope for is the people who are in service of our medical community here in Australia, in this colony, just thank me for the images and the stories that I've shared with them. So we're not even combating apathy, we're combating this middle grey zone of people who are somewhat sympathetic, maybe even a little bit empathetic, but don't actually take any action. And that's what really part of this advocacy has been all about, is to try to move hearts and change minds into propelling people towards taking some form of action.
Khaled, I'll ask you a little bit about the work that you've been doing as an engineer in Gaza. We have had countless experts, observers describe the deliberate destruction of hospitals and healthcare. I've heard experts use the term medicide as a component of genocide. So I guess in a sense that captures just the scale of the destruction. Take us into Gaza. How does an engineer even begin to repair what needs to be fixed? Because I'm sure all of us here in this room this evening, when we step into a doctor's clinic or a hospital, we expect a certain level of sanitation, we expect a certain level of sophistication with the equipment, and yet the work that Dr. Sanjay was having to do with the bare minimum is unfathomable. Could you talk to us a bit about how you begin that process of trying to make these hospitals functioning and functional?
Sometimes you see critical equipment that cannot be used in anything other than critical medical surgeries that have been smashed with a baseball bat after the occupation has been into a hospital, or have been smashed with the back of a rifle, for example. So that is only deliberate destruction, just to destroy any chance of survival for the people of Gaza. It's annoying and ridiculous to a point that you see critical equipment that are used for life-saving, such as oxygen tanks and X-rays and CT scans, where even if they haven't been damaged by missiles or big attacks, you see that the wires and the circuit, the control unit, has been, all the wires have been cut with a knife or with scissors. So, I mean, what kind of person will do this, and what reason can be behind this other than stopping the doctors from saving lives? So the equipment, by somehow in America, was not damaged by the missiles, then they go in and cut all the wires and smash the control unit. And when you see that, and then you cannot just simply order a new control unit because there is no border, the borders are shut, it's the biggest open air prison, and nothing can go in. So what we do, and basically what they do, because all credit goes back to the heroes on the ground there, I've learned a lot from them, is just like the doctors and the surgeons explained, we work in the exact same way, but from engineering perspective. So I think it was Dr. Sanjay that said he looks at patients when a big attack happens, and he straight away tries and filters which lives can be saved. And then it's a very hard choice, but there is a capacity that he can work on, and he's on full capacity, and he has to choose the ones that he can save. And it's the same when it comes to how we run hospitals. So we save what we can save, and the decisions are made by how long does this take to save? First, is it savable or not? Do we have whatever we need from inside there to fix that machine? And then how many lives it will save and how long it will take to save. So to kind of just to see how much lives, or how easy can we make the doctors' lives with what we have, and that's how it's based. So it's not based on, okay, we have a list of broken items that we need to fix, because the list is never ending, and most of the list we cannot fix. We look at what's the highest return life-saving that we can work on right now. So for example, and the biggest problem is none of this is sustainable. So it was mentioned, I think, before about the C-arm, the image intensifier, that I was honored and privileged to be in Gaza and to see that, for a smile on some of the doctors and surgeons' face in there. But even the way we fixed it is we had, so basically we connected with every hospital, remaining working kind of hospital that's there in Gaza, and we looked at all the C-arms that we had that are not working. And we were able to collect 4 of them. And out of these 4, we put together parts from 4 different ones to get 1 working machine. So yes, we still fixed 1, but now if anything goes wrong with that one, we don't have any more supply. It's not sustainable, because now if anything breaks, if we're lucky that whatever broke is still available in one of the other machines, we can fix it. Other than that, we can't. And then it's a limited amount, a couple of times, and then that's it, the machine is broken. And that's how things are fixed there. Another thing the engineers do, and I've actually documented and recorded that, sometimes they get to a point of creativity and because they just want to save lives and do whatever they can for the community. They do things like we done them in the Stone Age. So they actually craft the metal with their hands and then they melt it in an oven that's used for cooking just to be able to bend it and then make some kind of pipe that will connect something and help save lives. And so basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's a real shame that in this day and age and in front of the eyes of the world that is happening in Gaza. One of the parts of the documentary that really moved me was the story of the young girl Fatima who had arrived at the hospital without her arm, and we saw that really shocking image of her arm in the kafir on the side of the hospital there. I read some months ago that there are more child amputees in Gaza than anywhere else in the world, proportionate to the size of the population. And in this article that I was reading, it posed these two questions. What does an amputation mean in a place with no sidewalks, no streets, wheelchair ramps or prosthetics? What kind of outcomes will exist for the children who have no access to psychologists, physical therapists, legal rights, or even a home? And Dr. Sanjay, Dr. Siraj, you were so clearly moved in the documentary by what you were seeing. I wonder if I could get you to reflect on that as two individuals who have essentially dedicated your lives to providing care, knowing that there are so many children who will live with these severe disabilities, and what obligation is there on the rest of the world, including our governments, to provide some sort of support, relief, help.
It's heartbreaking. It's probably the toughest thing you'd see is see a child suffer. And these are kids who, they would wake up and they would think, okay, I'm going to have a fun day with my friends and go for a run, and instead they go to a park where they kick a ball around and they're bombed and they lose a limb or both limbs or end up dead. And how can we watch this and find this is excusable in any way? It's essentially, even if the child survives, as this young girl did, the problem is that it is almost a death sentence, because she is living in a world where she has to search for food, where she has to be able to find ways to clean herself. The prospects of getting married and having a family become diminished. Her prospect of employment and to be able to do something which involves labour is gone. So, although she survived, she's ended up with a life that is no way fulfilling or is going to be very challenging in this environment. I think as recognising this, I think it's a responsibility of all governments around the world to be able to rectify this, to make this a place where people in these circumstances and the huge number of child amputees can survive and also have a fulfilling life in whichever way possible, whether it's to supply prostheses, whether it's to supply home equipment, whether it's to supply, as a starting point, just basic food where they don't have to go searching for it, and water. That's probably the most heartbreaking thing that you can see there.
Just as a quick point, just about the comment with the amputations. So actually, you almost wish, it's definitely a much easier time for family members, actually, if sometimes people who've got double or triple amputations, if those patients, whether they be children or adults, pass away. So I'll just paint a scenario, because I was thinking about two of my patients. One of them's Hamad Darwish, so he was 17. He finally got evacuated to Egypt, and he had his right upper arm auto-amputated a year and a half ago, and his right lower leg dangling by the thread of some metalware that was keeping it together. You can try to imagine that if you don't have any mobility, and in Gaza you have to go walk 3 hours to go and try and get water to be able to survive, you have to walk up and down stairs in the hospital if that's where you're potentially displaced or you're in a tent. There's no wheelchairs. A lot of these kids or patients will have to rely on their family or their community members. And if it's a person who's in their 20s or 30s and their parents are elderly, then who is it that's going to be looking after that family member? So how does that relate to now? Well, I mean, there's a few different things. Certainly by no means should our pressure and our advocacy be lessening. In fact, we've got to go full steam ahead with everything now, because the double standards and the fact that there's been no accountability for the fact that Israel has said that, you know, they're going to abide by such ceasefire, and yet they've violated it like 167 times already by either snipering people towards this invisible yellow line that separates where the Palestinians can go or not go, the fact that still bombs are dropping, the fact that tents are not allowed in. So, I mean, GMFA did a tent drive not so long ago. We're talking about helping tens or hundreds of families. Well, what about the thousands that have had their tents now buried underneath the water with the rainfall in the last 48 hours? They literally have nowhere else to go. And so, again, it's our responsibility as people who are here on the outside to use our privilege and our comfort and our safety to advocate for all of those Palestinians who don't have a voice and honestly don't have the energy beyond trying to survive day in, day out to try to hold their perpetrators to account for what's occurred. And so that's the onus is then really put back on us to do more for them. They've sacrificed more than anyone here could ever know, way more than us. And so it's not only our duty, but it's our moral obligation to do that something for them.
So I've been told we actually have some time for audience questions.
We've heard about the incredible advocacy we've seen over the last year and a half. And I'm interested in knowing about the consequences, if any, of that advocacy over the course of the genocide. We have seen efforts by the Zionist lobby here to silence people from across the board for their advocacy for calling for a ceasefire and the end to Israel's genocidal onslaught. My question is, have you faced any backlash for your activism and for your advocacy since returning from Gaza? And if so, how have you fared in the face of that campaign? And are you noticing an increase or a decrease in the level of hostility that you're facing from the Zionist lobby?
My mum's here, so I don't want to say too much. So I've had a couple of phone calls from various people who wouldn't identify themselves. I've been invited to talk at various places in healthcare, and in my own area, health, was told that I probably shouldn't say anything. So indirectly, you're sort of targeted, but you just sort of put it behind you and just do what's right. So, and I think I've said this multiple times. It's not. I'm not a Muslim. I'm a Hindu by background, and if the same thing was happening in Israel, I would be doing the same advocacy. It's just about a persecuted group of people that deserve better.
The one thing that I got told very early on by a lot of strong pro-Palestinian advocates is that it's very hard to argue with experience. So when we bring first-hand experience from our medical missions and we share that within our medical fraternity, there's not a lot of room for discussion around that. For some reason, general surgery within the medical community seems to be a bit more open to the idea of hearing stories from Gaza and listening to our experience from these medical missions. I've certainly actually been given a lot of opportunity to speak at different medical conferences and institutions. In some ways, it's exceptionally disappointing because the institutions themselves will not actually speak publicly on behalf of the medical community to actually name who the perpetrator is, to state that there have been violations of international humanitarian law, but yet they have in their very small, tiny way given some opportunity for us to discuss that, to discuss those experiences. Lots of my colleagues, some of which are in this audience, have had notifications for their medical licenses to be suspended or doxed. I've certainly got friends and comrades now over the last 2 years that have lost job opportunities, that have had their privileges suspended, some of which you would think should have no real reason to be targeted, and they've been saying very crazy things like don't bomb children and maybe hospitals shouldn't be targets in the place of Gaza. So trying to sort of maintain a framework for being vocal and trying to spread the word, yet also being able to do the actual necessary work on the ground is a balance that everyone has to find for themselves. But for the most part, slowly people are becoming a little bit more courageous and vocal in terms of really sticking to their guns about what they believe to be right and having that courage to say it out loud, even when it might cost them certain job opportunities. And the one thing I'll say is that we should be a community from that regard. So really lean on each other and look to support your fellow friends and colleagues, because they can't come after us all, and we're stronger when we're united, and we're all trying to say the same thing. Like Sanjay said, I mean, there shouldn't be any second guessing about the message that's coming out. In Gaza, there's an oppressor and there's an oppressed people that don't have a voice, and we need to work harder to be that voice for them.
Hi there, my name is Fatima. Thank you to everyone, the people behind the scenes for the documentary and the panellists. My question is about the middle grey zone that Nour touched on. Dr. Bushra touched on. The people who might seem sympathetic or might seem neutral, our friends, our family members that don't necessarily want to even engage in a conversation, but are not necessarily the other side either. How or what can we all do in this room to take back to our communities, to take back to our friends, to take back to our colleagues, to push them to move? Because I have found personally the speaking is no longer working, the sharing of videos is no longer working, invitations to protests are being ignored. And I myself work in medicine, and I'm finding it very difficult to maintain those relationships, but I'm trying to persist with hope. But I'm interested to hear about all of your experiences on the panel, because all of you work in different spaces, and I'm interested to hear about what might be working. And I think it's important for all of us to sort of take those tips away.
You touched base on a very important point, which is all the people in the grey area, and they are the people that we should be reaching out to. And I think thanks to Erica and Jason, one of the things that we can do is make them watch this documentary actually until the sky falls quiet. And I think that's one of the main aims. Erica and Jason worked on this so hard, so it can reach all the people that are in the middle, that didn't take a side till now, and especially a lot of the people that say, I don't know enough to take a side, or I don't know about the situation, I don't know about the Middle East, I stick to the local news and that's all I know. Well, there's a documentary that's made by Australians, for Australians, by Australian doctors, that shows the truth. And I think about talking and sending all the invites for the protests and so on, it's obviously very important, but I think it needs to come from the inside. So at a point, I felt that I still continue to talk to everyone that I can and every chance I get, but at some point people just stop listening and it becomes just like spam messaging. They open it, okay, read, and they don't even reply. So the point is, maybe until the sky falls quiet can make the difference that we're hoping it makes by having them to watch this and encourage them to watch it. It will change their point and get them wanting to move or do something from the inside.
The problem is, it's human nature is that you're going to look after yourself and your family first. That's what people prioritize. You can't force people to do something that you're passionate about. All you can do is try your best, and if you're happy that you're trying your best, that's all you need to do.
The only thing I'm going to add is don't stop talking. I've done everything in our capacity to speak to colleagues, people who come, patients. I've got this posters on my workplace which initially they did not agree to put, but then again they had a change of heart and they did. So one piece of advice is don't stop.
excellent question, Fatima. First thing I'd say is don't give up hope. We're trying to move a mountain. We're expecting that we're going to do a few things and that mountain's going to shift. It's going to take months and years for us to get the actions that the results, that we really want, but it requires like many actions up until then. The second thing I say, the other reason that I say don't give up hope is you don't know what invitation or what story or what video will move someone to potentially change. So just last week there was an event at UNSW where a few doctors shared their experiences, including Dr. Mohammed Abu Nada, who's from Gaza and is now here in Sydney. And I had a friend reach out to say that her brother-in-law, who has never once taken any interest in anything, felt obliged to come out of guilt to such an event and walked away thinking, actually, this is something that I have to engage with now. So it's not for us to decide what that turning point will be for other people, but it's necessary for us to still do the hard slog of continuing to talk about it. And the other super important thing is BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions. Katie from APAN is here to talk about that. We do not want to be investing our money and our time and energy and efforts in institutions and companies that are dropping the bombs on our fellow Palestinians in Gaza or anywhere else around the world for that matter. And so we need to do better in terms of where we spend our time and our money. Yeah.
Can you please put your hands together once again for our panel?